Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
I discover something every day. Just yesterday, I remember that you can say, select from Jeff through helicopter, and it will just select that text. And then you can, say, bold that or delete it or copy it and move it. And
Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of iPad Pros. Joined today once again is Tom Snyder. Tom was on some of the earlier episodes of this podcast. His first appearance was on episode 26 back in June of 2018, and he was also on episode 68 in December of 2019. So it's been a fair while here, 5-6 years, and we have a lot to dive into. So in this episode, we're going to dive into kind of his current iPad setup, his current process of writing a novel with the iPad, and his extensive use of voice control, the accessibility feature that is far more deep and extensive than I even realized myself, and kind of some hopes and wishes that we had for Apple Notes, reminders, and just a very free-form conversation that I hope you'll enjoy. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do so over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. My great thanks to everyone that supports the show financially. It means a great deal. And by supporting the show financially, you'll get early access to both iPad Pros and my other podcast, Vision Pros. So once again, my great thanks to anyone that supports the show. Another way to support the podcast is by just leaving a review in Apple Podcasts. Those reviews go a long way in helping others discover the show. And with that, here's my discussion with Tom. Enjoy. Welcome back to the podcast, Tom. It's been about, 6 years now?
No, is that possible?
It is. So I was looking back at this. You were on episodes 26 and 68. Episode 68 was December of 2019, so a good 5 or 6 years. It's been a fair while.
Yeah, that was before or during me going through puberty, I think.
Right, yeah.
It was that long ago.
Yeah. No, I mean, a ton has happened in, just technology world.
It has.
Yeah.
It has.
The whole M series chips, this is just after the 2018 iPad that everyone reveres so heavily. And so much has happened. So, we've talked in the past about getting things done methodology, script writing, some basic programming, Dragon Anywhere, which I'm not sure if is that still an app that's.
It was.
Yeah.
It may still be out there. It's insanely expensive, and it can be replaced with the as we were talking about beforehand, the voice control that's either both on the Mac and the iPad that allows you not just to dictate, but in the middle of dictating, say something like go back 2 sentences, capitalize the word, Tom.
Sure.
Because it's accidentally and you can do invent your own commands, your own custom voice commands. So, you can become a real power user of voice control for dictation. And it seems like it's the same basic engine methodology of the regular dictation. It's about that level of accuracy, I would say.
We'll have to dive into that in a second here. For just a reminder for those that haven't been with us since the beginning of the podcast, near the beginning, can you share a bit on your background? What is it you do? Yeah.
Sure. Well, I can share my background, especially as it relates to managing things using computers. When I was 30, I started a company that was a software company, and we created the first software, the first educational software for the Mac back in 83, 84. It had to be 83 because the Mac came out in 84 and it was available right from the start. And those were back in the days when you couldn't program on a Mac. you had to connect it through, a 27-pin plug to a Contron workstation, and work in not. I don't think all the languages were available, so we basically doing a lot of assembler code, and so that company grew up, and we had a lot of people and a lot of projects that had to be managed, and that company was started in 1980, and there were spreadsheets and word processors, but there wasn't really a lot of great management software for a small company. And I started a second company that was owned by the first, that was a television production company. And there again, you have products that you have to get out, every 2 weeks, or depending on the television show you were doing. We were doing animation too, and writing. So there's incredibly complex coordination between writing, producing, animation, sound, styling.
Yeah, animation is a world that just fascinates me, because it seems like how does this not take just like a decade to create something with like all this hand drawn stuff? And
Yes. Well,
yeah.
We were very lucky because I invented a form of animation that was described even by people who adored it in the industry as the perfect crime, because I could generate the animation on a computer, and I could just use illustrators and not animators for it. And so we were able to do that. But nonetheless, we're a small company in Cambridge, Massachusetts, with all local, so we weren't New York or we weren't in LA, but we were dealing with those cities all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, at one point the company was in my house, this very room, yeah, and many other rooms in this house. My wife, God bless her, let us have. But so we were always searching for tools, and I forget if I mentioned this 7 years ago.
Right. Yeah.
But one of the my partner and I founded the company, and I was the head designer. But my business partner and I developed a voracious appetite for project planning and task management and note taking software. And we hit on a program called More that came out in 1985 for the Mac. I don't think it came out for Windows as well. And it was an outliner that is hauntingly close to what the very best outliners today have built into them. For example, probably the most powerful outliner that's out there is the little program called Workflowy. I don't know if you've ever played with that.
That's not. No.
Yeah, you should really try it. It's an
Okay.
app for the iPad and for the Mac. And it's so simple at its basis, because it's an outliner where you use tab to indent, and then you can collapse whatever you have just indented. But
Workflowy with the Y.
pardon me?
Workflowy with the Y.
Yes, Flowy.
Yeah, I just found it. Yep.
And it's free for a lot of its usage. But so just with that technology of bullets that can be indented, they have managed to put in task management, project management. You can take an outline and convert it to a Kanban presentation. You can ghost. You can create a ghost of an element in the outline and have it show up in two different places in the outline. And we got very intrigued with that because with just learning one fundamental concept of indenting and collapsing and expanding, you have the entire methodology of the entire program. So if you had a section in there called finance, that could just be a top level parent bullet, and you can explode down many, many layers deep and many layers into grandchildren and their grandchildren. And you can zoom in on any one bullet, and it's a full featured text, and you can add images to it. And so we were very excited by that because we could train everybody to use it right away and share the documents. And so everyone could look into where any project was. And instead of having files and folders or files within files and all the things that they do today, like in Craft or some tool like that, it's all just the same methodology at every level. And you're always in a word processor. And at any time you're looking at a bullet, if you click on that bullet, it goes to full screen, and it's an entire work place for you. So we were very excited by that. And then with time, we got very excited by Microsoft OneNote, and I think that came out around 2000.
And that's developed into a very powerful tool and a very, I don't use it personally, but from people that I know that use it on iPad, very good iPad citizen overall.
It is a good iPad citizen. And however, the original OneNote, famously, Bill Gates, when he announced it, actually teared up when he was talking about it because he was so excited about the idea of an app that could take notes but could store PDFs and pictures and sound all in the context of a note. And that's what is so popular today, is these note-taking apps. But he was very excited because there really wasn't anything that general purpose that was that easy to operate. Now, the Windows version of OneNote is much more powerful than the Macintosh version, because the Windows version has full outlining with collapsing, etc., and the Apple versions of OneNote are just sort of note bucket holders, without that outlining technology. So we started getting interested in those note-taking apps, and then from there we were always on the hunt. And it's interesting today, if you're an entrepreneur, a small entrepreneur just starting off, or you're someone who is just not obsessed, but appropriately obsessed with keeping records for your family, everything to, that new valve you had to get for your furnace that you have a receipt for and a warranty for, and you have a narrative about why it was difficult to install. All of that contextual data you want to put somewhere. Mm-hmm. And probably not just in Word documents that are nested in folders, right. Because it's too hard to integrate lots of different kinds of information into those things. So to this day, I am still obsessed with my current companies. Unfortunately, I sold both my companies, and I make the mistake of starting new ones and starting new big projects, all of which need, they're operated on a shoestring. And so the people, the employees, we don't have all the money in the world for big, expensive solutions. But it is interesting in this note-taking space, which I think is going to be more and more powerful every year going forward, especially with AI. And there are these enterprise things that you can do that are mostly really on the web. And you've got to be online to be using them. And they're very good at collaboration and keeping track of projects and their tasks. And so you can do that, or you can try to cobble together your own system. And YouTube and is just full of different solutions for how to build such a note-taking, project planning, life planning environment. And
And there's so many different. It's a very competitive space, and
it is, and there are gurus. And
totally,
you have to be attractive to be a guru.
You do, yes.
Yes.
But I'm very jealous of the kids going through school now, where you can have like audio linked to like a timestamp where you're recording the class lecture, and you just jot a note down, listen here, and just tap it, and it brings you to that audio. It's so great.
The technology for students is fantastic too. But one of the things that's gotten very popular just in the last 2 to 3 years is people getting excited by the native apps that Apple has that you can cobble together into a suite of, sort of interlocking apps that can help you run a business. And I'm very disappointed that as much as I wanted to have reminders and Apple Notes do those things for me, they are not up to the job. And as you can tell, if I'm willing to just use an outliner to do all that, where it's just bullets under bullets under bullets, I don't seem like a guy who's hard to please. But
they're getting better, but they're not there quite yet for a lot of things.
For example, recently I've embarked on a project. We had a family member die, and rather remote family, but the wife and husband didn't have good paper systems, so that the surviving wife, would be able to know, where is everything? Who do I call? Where are the instructions for this, that, and the other thing? And it's amazing if you sort of do an inventory of what's in your house that are important systems. And so I started doing that for my wife and I, just because we were jolted into realization of what can happen. And I thought, well, even though I use more powerful tools than Apple Notes, because I'm part of this huge discussion group that involves you and about 50 other professionals, and we all listen to each other. And but I thought, I will try Apple Notes to see how well it can do. And there are the strangest gotchas. For example, you might, in Apple Notes, you can set up a folder structure.
Yep. And you can share the folder, which is nice.
Pardon me?
And you can share the folder quite easily with other family members and whatnot. Yeah.
Yes. So that was one of the things that attracted me to it. But the gotchas were mounting up. And one of them is you can create folders within folders in Apple Notes, all of which contain notes.
Yeah.
But let's say you have a folder that is a general area of concern in your house, and then you have a subfolder that contains things in it or operations in it, or, it's just so vast. And maybe you have a couple notes that are spread throughout. Mm-hmm. You can look up a note very quickly because the search is fantastic. That's a plus for it because it looks at the title of the note, the contents of the note, etc. But if you are generally, you're on the phone and you're talking to someone, to a doctor, and they want to know about your health insurance, and you think, health insurance, where is that? Now, if in Apple Notes, if you just do health, it's going to point you to a whole lot of individual notes. And so you'd think you could go to one of those notes and then look on either side of that note, look around that note to the notes that are clustered with it, but you can't. It only takes you to that note. And if that note is in a folder with 6 other notes, you can't see those other notes. You have to go all the way back out and dive deep into the folder structure. And that's incredibly unhelpful if you're on the phone and you're talking with a vendor or something like that. And whereas most note-taking apps will put you in that folder within the structure that note is in, so that you can look in that area.
And am I right that, like, say you want PDFs a part of your data source in the Apple Notes app, you have to import that inside of an Apple Note. You can't just have PDFs within a folder. Is that accurate?
Oh, no, you can. It seems to do it in 2 different ways. If you just if you use the share sheet to add a PDF into into Apple Notes with just and you're sending a PDF, it will exist as this sort of standalone thing, and it'll be the title. The title of it will be the thing. Or if you are, what I find much more useful is if you're talking about your furnace and this valve, there's kind of a narrative that goes with a lot of these things as your life progresses, and it's the day you bought it and the people you bought it from and the warranty and the receipt and the instruction manual, and you can do all of that within a continuous note, so it's easier to get context.
Right.
But the second gotcha with Apple Notes that I was surprised, because I used, talking to people at Apple, and I used ChatGPT and other forms of AI that know a lot about the history of Apple Notes, etc. If you look up, well, let's just talking about backup. Let's say your entire family operating manual, is in Apple Notes. Well, of course, it's sunk, past tense of synced.
Yeah.
It's sunk up with, in my case, iCloud, but that's not a backup. And that has
no, because you can have, say, a family member accidentally delete the entire contents of that note, and you wouldn't know it, and it's just gone.
Yeah. And, as an aside, these are things that I'm very concerned about, because I help a lot of people, both professionally and unprofessionally, set up their small businesses or their home operations on a computer. And a lot of these people are not particularly computer savvy. And so that's the kind of person who will think, well, I'm all backed up. So
yeah, and it's a shame Time Machine or something similar hasn't made its way to iPad or iPhone at this point.
Well, I'm very glad you mentioned that, Tim, because I thought I do, in my closet over there behind me, have an iPad. I mean a Mac.
Right.
And I have it out 1 in 100 days that I'm using my iPad. And I thought, well, I can use Time Machine.
I'm curious, how Apple Notes would even work with Time Machine if that data is stored in a way that you could revert, or if it's not. Yeah.
Well, if you look it up, you can back it up in Time Machine.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was doing this because, back 6 months ago, I was trying to find the perfect system to encapsulate all this family information. So I thought, what about backups? Because things do happen. And so I backed it up on Time Machine. Or alternately, the other way you can back it up is send a message to Apple through the iCloud website and request them to send you a bundle.
That's right. They do offer that, yeah.
That it takes 2 to 3 weeks or something like that. But when that bundle arrives, or when you have...
It's not a very user-friendly bundle from my understanding.
It's not. And it doesn't, you can't undo it to maintain the format of everything
right.
that you had before. And if you think about it, the format, the structuring of all your data is a big part of the work product.
Absolutely.
You've spent hours making it accessible and quick and available to other people to access. And you don't really just want a big clump of stuff, because it would take weeks in some cases. And so there's no real adequate way to back up Apple Notes.
No, you can one-off copy and you can probably duplicate a note somehow. I don't know. Do you have to manually duplicate the contents, or is there an Apple Notes?
Yeah, you can export them, I think, as PDFs perhaps.
Yeah, but it's a very manual process, yeah.
Yes, but if, during a week, you're working in Apple Notes all the time with your business or with your family, and then you have to go in and remember all the notes that you're going to need to back up, and then you have to assemble them somewhere. It's not real. And it's interesting because if you ask Apple, they say it's really important to have backups off-site in addition to whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
You just can't do that on Apple Notes in a significant way. So, and same is true with reminders, and so when I'm working with people on the iPad or the Mac, but really mostly iPad, I am looking for tools that unfortunately are not native. It would be great to have those native tools be able to do it. But one of the things, sadly, that you can't do between Apple Notes and reminders is really do simple links. Like, for example, if you had a reminder to get in touch with Tim Chatton, and it's a project, you'd think, well, maybe I could link in that reminder to an Apple Note.
Yeah. That'd be a nice thing.
Wouldn't that?
Yeah. I think there's a way to say, remind me of this email, and that'll link you to an email, but there's no system for notes. Yeah.
I was very excited when I saw that the first time, and I thought, maybe this is working system-wide. But
and I wonder with this new advanced Siri they're working on if this will be a part of that roadmap of making notes more linkable in that way.
Well, yeah, that's hopeful to the extent you can use Siri as an agent to do workflows for you that would, set that kind of thing up. So I tried other programs like Notion, which is pretty good on the iPad. You know what I remember, Tim, from 7 years ago?
Yeah.
I remember telling you about a program called Notion, and you only knew back then of the
the music notation app.
Music notation.
Yeah.
App. And I said, no, there's another Notion. and I said, wait a minute, can there be two apps called Notion? And there were.
There were, yeah. Yeah, and both are still around, and Notion has grown much more in popularity at this point, yeah.
I took the course on Notion because I thought, well, that might be an app that you can do integrated tasks and notes and make backups on. No, on the backups. You can do backups, but you have to export individual things like you would have to in Apple Notes. Or you can try to export everything, but even on a Mac, if your Notion files are big enough, it will just cough in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So I took a course with, I forget the woman's name, but it was a couple $100, and I did the whole training on it to learn. And I was waiting for the last day when, we could all be online and ask questions. And I said, well, we've all been taught how to get all of our, projects and everything and notes all synced up. What do you do if Notion server loses your file? What's your backup strategy? And the woman and her husband looked at each other because they both ran this thing.
Yeah.
It was like they didn't want to talk about it. And I said, well, let's talk about it, because it's kind of interesting. And so I think we're at an inflection point in the world where we are both told, make sure you have offsite backups. And we're also in a world that unless you're a corporate client and paying an absurd amount, monthly or yearly to use these products, you can't have reconstructible backups.
Yeah, I think probably I think Devin thinks probably one of the better tools. It's also very geeky. Like, I still have problems trying to get my Synology hooked up to it properly to do a backup from it. I know it's possible, but Devin thinks probably the one, if you can figure out setup, that would work pretty well with this.
Yes, and it's local. You can set it up to be local first.
Yes, yeah.
But that's interesting because Devon Think, I actually spent a lot of time trying to conquer Devon Think, and it's not pretty.
No, it's an old school app. It's got a lot of features, but it's not the most beautiful app in the world. On the Mac, they have this great exportability from Evernote, which I appreciate. So I was able to export all my Evernotes into Devon Think with a single button press, which was nice, and it did a good job with that.
Interestingly, Evernote, now owned by an Italian company, what is it? Bending Spoons? Is that still the name?
That sounds familiar. Yeah, I miss the days when Phil Libin was running it, and you had all this innovative stuff like the flashcard app and stuff like that. Yeah,
it was truly fun back in those days. But talk about the quintessential app that you can't get your stuff out of.
Yes, exactly.
They set the bar very high.
They did.
Right now, I've devolved to really something I never thought I would use, which is Obsidian. For 100% of my tasks, notes, projects,
because that's an app that just stores everything in your iCloud Drive or wherever you want it to be, right? Yeah, so it's all local and you can back it up. Yeah,
it'll store it locally on your machine, Mac or iPad, and then you can pay. It's free unless you're paying for the sync service.
Mm-hmm.
And that, just as of a week or so ago, they made the sharing aspect of it free. So you don't have to get sort of the equivalent of a business license that's more expensive. But so everything is right there, and it's all in a folder basically called Obsidian, everything, and you can make a copy of that and send it where you will.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, I've heard a lot of great things about Obsidian, and the backup angle is something that is, of course, right there, with just how it's all formatted.
Yeah, I'm not using their backup service simply because I haven't, disk drives here that I can send them to from my iPad, and then I figure, I have a little workflow that I do at the end of every day that backs the stuff up to iCloud. It's on iCloud. It backs it up to another area of iCloud. It backs it up to Dropbox.
And is that through a shortcut you built?
Yeah.
Yep. Nice. Yeah.
And then it backs it up to a drive that I plug in. I have, you're not going to believe this, but I have not invested in dongles. So I'm unplugging my iPad to plug in my disk drive, sort of thing.
Yeah, the Thunderbolt dock has been one of my favorite purchases in the past many years. It was expensive, but it's very nice when I'm at my desk and just plug in and everything just kind of connects and is reliable with it.
Do you have a favorite of those?
I have an OWC dock, but there's a lot of different options out there. The new ones are especially good with the integrated power supplies and stuff, because this one has a big honking power supply. But I can send you some different ones that are good.
Yeah.
But it's nice. It's got like an SD card slot and I've got Ethernet on my iPad whenever I plug into it. It's nice. Yeah.
Oh boy. So
Yeah, it's wild. It's like I've got wired internet whenever I plug into the dock. It's.
I think I like the fact that I can pick up and go really fast with I have an Apple Studio monitor.
Okay. Yeah.
That I plug in.
But yeah, you could theoretically plug the monitor into the dock, and then you plug your iPad into the dock from there.
Yeah.
And you got everything. Yeah. Because the Mac gets you a couple USB ports, but not a ton of stuff, I believe.
I think I've heard you on previous shows say that you have concocted a kind of a Mac arrangement for yourself.
I've got a half of a Mac. I've got a MacBook Air that's just the
way that
slab
Federico did.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did that largely because of the Vision Pro. And I wanted a trackpad and keyboard in one unit that was more friendly than trying to tape them together. So it works great at the desk too, as just like a desktop computer almost when you just plug into the dock here. Yeah.
Do you spend much time in doing the kinds of things you regularly do on the iPad on the Mac? Yeah, I'm not talking about special like video editing and stuff, but
no. Mainly it's recording the podcast through the audio hijack is kind of the main Mac thing, and most of the other computery stuff I'm actually still on the iPad or the Vision Pro. For at this point, yeah.
I feel like a large number of podcasts and some YouTubers that accidentally find themselves criticizing the iPad, forgetting that of the hundreds of millions of people who are using iPads, very few of them are doing two-way synchronization with phone calls and video, requiring a Mac.
Yes, and for years I used the Zoom H6 recorder, whatever, to do all the recording, and it worked great. It eventually, after 7 or 8 years, the hardware started failing a bit on me, so it was good timing that the Mac was, there, and it's like, let me try this, and so, but yeah, the Zoom H6 like audio recorders works great, like
they are, and there's a little bit of lack of automation doing that, but in my closet right here, I have all my Zooms from former days when I was doing the very things that podcasters, have to do.
Yeah.
But I feel that it's unfortunate that oftentimes people will get carried away and say, well, the iPad's not a real computer. And what they mean is I can't do my podcasts.
Exactly. And the ironic thing is the best, you've used Ferrite before. I think we talked about it in a previous episode. I think the best podcast editing tool is Ferrite. Like, it's custom built for that. I think Logic is a weird tool to use for podcast editing, I think. And Ferrite is everything's built in. You get the chapter markers there. You've got the audio level. Like, everything's there and built out. And it's, I think, the fastest, best way to do the actual editing and, get it out the door.
It's a spectacular surface to work on.
Yeah.
Ferrite. And I actually produced some TV animation for network TV using the Ferrite.
Huh. Because, how so? Because it is purely audio at this point, right?
Yes, but the way audio and animation are linked together is not necessarily through the Ferrite app.
I see. Yes.
The way, and so, especially a lot of our shows were comedy shows, and timing was very important. So we would put people we couldn't do what's called looping, where you put actors in front of the screen and they're trying to say their lines, at the right time.
Yeah.
It's the other way around, where we record live actors with a lot of improv and then edit that down and then tie the animation to that audio. And so the audio comes first.
Right.
And
so you would edit the audio in Ferrite, and then from there send it to the application to do the animation, kind of sync up to it.
yes.
Yeah.
And for example, we would send an episode to Comedy Central or to ABC, and they would hear the final audio before any animation was done. And so any notes they had were on our audio.
That makes sense, because that'd be the quicker thing to make edits on versus someone's animation work.
I'll say.
Yeah.
I'll say.
Did you ever play around with Procreate Dreams or?
Yes, I did a little bit, and you certainly can do some great stuff in there. I'm not very good with visual tools on the Mac, even though I ran
me either. I can do audio stuff, but yeah, like the Procreate stuff, like it's fun to dabble with. But yeah,
yes. And with the interface of with what's the name of the audio software again?
Ferrite.
Ferrite. If you're using the tablet and a keyboard and your pen, you can start working at the speed of thought. And
definitely,
it's one thing to edit a podcast, which I've done, but to edit comedy dialogue at speed and thinking to yourself, oh, the character Benjamin said a very funny thing in a completely different context 4 hours ago in the recording session.
Yeah.
And to have been able to tag it, find it, and quickly drop it in place, and then smooth the rough edges on the cut. You can. I think it's one of the most intuitive audio interface setups that exists anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's so fluid, I would say. Like it's just and you can configure it however your mind thinks. Like you can configure the pencil with its squeeze gesture now in the Pencil Pro to do that, and the keyboard shortcuts you can configure how you need, and it's just very intuitive. Yeah,
and I would say some of the add-on audio tools for stripping silence and other things are very high quality. With good engines in them. I haven't picked it up in a couple of months. Are they continuing to make revisions on it and updates?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if you've used it since they had their latest big update, but the biggest godsend was you can edit audio at 2x playback now, which saves me countless hours every month. Like,
yes,
it's incredible that they figured that out.
Well, what begins to happen if you've done enough animation audio is I can recognize someone saying, "Oh my God, the door just opened," by the waveform.
Definitely, yeah.
So at that point, you're pretty sped up.
Yeah, and there's a whole templating system now, which is great. So each podcast has their own template, and you have a starting point to work from. And he's definitely still hard at work at that app and making it better, and continues to impress.
One of the reasons, this is a little controversial, I was asking if you do things on your Mac, at your desktop Mac there.
Yeah.
Like all the things you do on your iPad during the day.
I guess the biggest thing I would do, if I'm on the Vision Pro, I'll sometimes just do a big ultra-wide monitor with the Mac, with Agenda open to draft my notes up and have some reference windows around it. But yeah, the Mac and that. Yeah, if I'm using the Vision Pro, the Mac's definitely used more so. And if I'm on the iPad, the Mac's just a keyboard for the iPad OS mostly.
Because I've had an interesting parallel experience, because I'm old enough. If I was working on the Macintosh, in 1984, I'm definitely, old enough to have seen a lot of transitions in technology and operating systems, etc. And I remember and a lot of people today still do this, but they can remember the first time they got good and facile with the Macintosh, and then they tried to go back to Windows, and they thought, this is a hard transition.
Yes.
You can do everything in both things. There's no question you can do the same things
You can,
both
yeah.
places, but they don't make sense. And I have that experience when I pull out my Mac with my iPad, because I know everything I can do on my iPad, I can do on my Mac, but it does not make as much logical sense. And I would say it's pretty easy to know why. It's because the iPad is a new operating system.
Yeah. It's a different flow. Like it really is. The iPad, there is like a flow to using it, and the Mac's just a way different.
Yeah.
Yeah, way different. Way of using a computer.
And they're continuing to develop both of them, but the Mac is still pulling forward an awful lot of baggage. For example, it's interesting working with young clients. By young, I mean older than you, Tim.
Sure.
But who are just getting started or need some help in figuring out how to organize themselves. And I will watch a person using a Mac who has been using a Mac for perhaps, 30 years now.
Yeah.
And they have Windows open all over their screen. And then when they go to quit out of an app to do another app, they actually X out of the window and leave the app still running. And then they launch another thing. And pretty soon they might have dozens of apps running, and with all windows either disappeared or lying on top of each other.
Yeah.
And I'll show them just a couple techniques, certainly on the new Macs, for how to, drag them to a window to the side and have it, put it in the right place. But there are so many ways that people can get screwed up on the Mac that the iPad doesn't allow. And that's exactly what people used to hate about the Mac. They used to call it the interface police all through the 80s and 90s, that they wanted you to use this thing in the way they thought was best. Well, the world has changed a lot.
Yeah, one button on the mouse, for instance. Why can't I do it? Yep.
And do you remember the original Macs didn't have cursor keys?
That's right. Yeah.
Because Steve Jobs said, I want you to just use the mouse.
Yeah.
And it shows how wrong a brilliant designer can be.
Well, at the same time, it was probably right for the beginning to force people to learn that new thing, and then once you've learned it, you can add on top of it. Like the iPad began purely as touch, and then once people got familiar with that, you add on top of that.
I knew Steve Jobs, and if you'd known him, you would have known that if his company hadn't made him put the arrow keys back in, the cursor keys, he never would have done it.
Probably not, yeah.
Like he wouldn't have, he didn't want to do a tablet.
Yeah.
His company had to talk him into it.
I'll tell you, it is amazing how intuitive the touch interfaces on iPhones and iPads. Like, I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and it blows my mind how she just knows how to basically run it without any instruction. Swiping away notifications and knowing. Yeah,
I know.
It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
it's very intuitive in a way that I'd be curious if she doesn't know how to use a mouse. Let's just put it that way.
There are an awful lot of people that I used to recommend getting the simplest MacBook, going to be doing stuff at home. And now that's the last thing I would recommend, because with the keyboard, or with a external keyboard and mouse and a screen, it's an easier world to get comfortable in quickly.
Yeah. What's your current iPad setup these days?
I have this is a great opportunity for me to ask you some questions that might cost me some money.
Sure, yeah.
But my iPad has the M2.
Okay, yep.
in it, and it's an iPad Pro 13-inch.
Okay. Yep.
I guess that's the official number, isn't it? And it's not 12.9 anymore.
It is 13 now. Yeah.
Yeah. Woo,
Even though it seems pretty close. Yeah. But yeah, it's 13 now. Yeah.
But and then I have the standard Mac keyboard. What do they call it? There's some confusion with the word Magic.
Well, there's the Magic Keyboard for Mac, and then there's Magic Keyboard for iPad, which turns it into a laptop. Yeah.
And I use the Magic Keyboard for Mac with my iPad.
Yeah. And then you have the display you hook up to when you're at the desk. And using the keyboard. Yeah.
And I use this Logitech mouse.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. That has your hand at an angle, which is really good
ergonomically and all that.
Yeah. And then I have, as I said, the Mac Studio display. And then my Mac, I don't take out really at all unless I'm trying to figure out how to back something up or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I have a Mac Mini that I take around in a pocket,
The new one, the M4, the tiny one?
I don't know how, there have only been 2 generations, right, of the Mini.
Well, I mean, there's been a lot. I mean, it started back, I think, in 2010 or somewhere around there.
Oh, the Mini?
Yeah, the Mac. Oh, the Mac Mini?
Not Mac. I'm sorry, iPad.
Oh, yeah, I must have misheard. Yeah. The
this
iPad
is what
Mini.
happens when you talk to someone who's 75.
Yeah, all good.
Nouns don't come out.
No, iPad Mini, there's been about, I think, 7 generations we're at to now, 6 or 7.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I have the one that, I want to look to see if, do they have facial recognition yet on the iPad Mini?
I think it's Touch ID still. They've moved it to like the sleep wake button. For the Touch ID sensor for that.
Oh, that's good. But I don't know if I need a new iPad. Because the M4 is it's M4, isn't it?
Yeah, M4.
I can't think of operations I do that require that much speed and power.
No, I mean I've an 11-inch M4, and then I have a 13-inch M1, and I mean it's a lot of niceties. Like, it is nice that it's thin and lighter and all that. I love the nano texture that I got. Like, it's the screen.
Oh, do you?
I love it. Like, because I move the iPad around so much, and just like it makes the screen more legible in more environments without. I didn't really notice.
To be careful how you touch it.
Not at all. No.
Okay.
It's not like the Mac version of it where that's the problem. But it's funny, before I had the nano texture, I didn't really notice the glare. Then if I grab my M1, I'll bring it into a room I used to be fine with. Oh God, look at all the glare on it. It definitely makes a difference with that stuff for me. But I'd say, you'd probably be fine holding out until it's not meeting your needs anymore. The M2.
Well, I understand that the Magic Keyboard for the newest iPad, is much better.
It is. I have not purchased it yet. Because I've been using the 11-inch as mainly a tablet, and then when I need a keyboard, I'll grab the Mac and do the universal control thing to the iPad. Because I realize, like, those keyboards are expensive. I really don't want. They still haven't gone on sale. Like, maybe when they finally have their first sale of the keyboards, they'll. I'll pick it up, but it still is the $300 for the keyboard, which is just a lot.
Well, since I last talked to you, I'm lucky because since I was in the software business, I always have a huge excuse with my wife.
Yes.
To buy technology, because I can explain anything that I need.
Sure.
in a very convincing way. But I have kept all of my iPads, and I've had many.
That's amazing.
And so I have a rowing machine to my right
Mm-hmm.
that has a mounted 13-inch iPad on it for
Yep.
watching movies, and I have an iPad in my kitchen, just for cooking,
Yeah.
so I can't trade them in because they're so useful and they never stop working.
Yeah. I still have an original iPad and an iPad 2. The iPad 2 definitely boots up and it can do stuff still, but
Yeah,
I keep them around mostly because like a historic artifact at this point. But yeah, that M1 iPad Pro, like, yeah, I think that thing will run strong for many, many years. Like, it's got a lot of headroom and great, but nice big screen on it. Yeah.
what do you have the newest iPad?
Yeah, I do. Yep.
And did you get that for a need for more processing power, or did you
No.
have
Yeah, yeah.
other aspects of it that are an improvement?
It was mainly I missed having a good small iPad. So the 10.5-inch iPad Pro, which I still adore, it finally got its last software update from Apple. Like they discontinued OS updates, so that meant like I'd get less use overall, and that iPad's become my daughter's iPad basically when she
Yeah,
gets her limited time with it. So yeah, I wanted a smaller iPad once again, and that's where it's like, oh, let's check out the 11-inch. That's kind of the main reason I
yeah,
picked it up. Because
yeah.
I mean, processing wise, like the M1, plenty fast still. Like for even video exports and stuff. Like it's
I
plenty
know,
good. Yeah.
I know. You know, just imagine what the M4 is capable of doing. I don't know if the throughputs are all there in the iPad.
They definitely are. And I've done some like local transcription work in it as well, and it definitely warms it up and like puts it to work. I mean, yeah, it's all there.
Yeah,
I just don't have a ton of need for all of that all the time.
I'm wondering whether it will make voice recognition even better to have more powerful processor.
I
Uh,
don't know, and I don't know if the
yeah,
mics are any better. The Apple Pencil Pro is another thing I do really love. Like
yeah,
the squeeze gesture is so much more tactile than the double tap, which
the
would
top.
be
Yeah,
yeah,
because
which
you
would
could
be
do.
yeah, I have a lot of false positives. So with podcast editing, the squeeze gesture, it's so much faster editing with that.
Yeah,
But overall, it's like a nice to have versus an essential update. Yeah, I'd say yeah.
yeah. I'm hoping someone can come up with an excuse for me on the new iPad. Because I want to believe that there's something fundamental other than, the, just the look of it,
Yeah, I mean
but
the OLED screen's very nice as well, but I mean the mini
yeah,
LED in the 13 inches isn't bad. It is with the 13 inches substantially lighter. Like they did shave a lot of weight off of it. Yeah, I don't know. For me, the nano texture is one of my favorite things, but depending on your environments, that may not make any difference at all.
Another thing that I find really superior in the iPad is the using the shortcuts.
The app, yeah, and it's on the Mac, but it feels like less integrated. Like more app developers, I think, probably do more with it on the iPad. I'm not sure on
Yeah,
that 100%, but it feels that's kind of the way.
well, yeah, and there are certain things that shortcuts use a lot, like the share sheet, and the share
Mm-hmm.
sheet is pretty impoverished on the Mac too.
Yeah.
You're lucky if you can find the app you want to send it
Yes.
to,
Yes, for sure.
listed in the world. But I use the shortcuts. You use something like Obsidian, and
Mm-hmm.
it has no really easy way to capture an idea or a note
Right.
because it's not really written in Appleese.
Yeah, it's a wrapper around something. It's not a native kind of experience. Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you can't very quickly write a a shortcut that you pick which note is your inbox, and then you record some dialogue. I mean, you record some dialogue, and then you have it append it or prepend it
Yes.
into the file that is your inbox in Obsidian, and it shows up immediately. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the combination of Obsidian and shortcuts is sort of the ultimate play set for inventing things on your iPad.
Yeah. And then you're working on a novel, is that right?
Yes.
And what's kind of the tool set you're using for that? Is that within Obsidian as well, or is that a separate app you're using?
I tried all of the things. They're dedicated novel writing apps. And
Scrivener's the one that comes to mind most, I think.
Scrivener, yeah.
Yep.
Although, it's almost like driving a car that's out of warranty. You don't know if there's anybody there anymore.
Yeah, that's an app I remember from when I was in college or whatever in the early 2000s, and it was a huge app back then, but I'm not sure how maintained it's been since then.
And then there is IA Writer too, but IA Writer seems more structured for people who write blogs and that sort of thing. Because, the formatting for a novel is no extra space between paragraphs and indenting the first line. And IA Writer is, that's not really the main problem, because IA Writer has a lot of export things that can reformat your text the way you want. Yeah. But it's sort of ungainly in how you string together chapters.
Sure. Ulysses would be another one I have heard.
Yes, and I've used them all. I used Ulysses for a former novel that I wrote. I find it unlovely. And so, as everything, ultimately, I looked at Scrivener and said, I can, in a day, structure Obsidian to do everything that Scrivener does. I mean, really everything.
Yeah.
Moving cards around in an outliner mode and just everything.
And God forbid you'd ever try it in Pages, which I know some people do, but I can't imagine writing a book in Pages. Even though it's got the ebook export and stuff, but I can't imagine doing it in that kind of format.
I don't know. I'm not sure why other people complain about it. I know why I do, because it's the last to have all the things that you would expect in a word processor. For example, let's say you have a line of text, and then a line of text below it, and you want to move one line above the other.
Yeah.
Look for the keyboard command on that.
Right.
You're not going to find it.
No. And I know a lot of publishers demand everything be in Microsoft Word, which I can't. I would not want to write a novel there. I'd prefer the pure text apps that aren't word processors. Yeah.
I don't pay for Microsoft Word, but when I submit a novel to my editor, she wants it in Word format. But
absolutely.
That's just an export.
Just an export. Yeah.
Function that you can do. From whatever you're writing in.
And the exports have gotten much better over the years. I remember back a couple decades ago where you export the Word and hope for the best, kind of.
Yeah. Well, now they have, what CSS snippets are?
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of these programs allow you to design your own beautifully formatted preference for the way you like to show it to your editor or to yourself, for that matter. And but the fun I have, and I wouldn't recommend Obsidian to anyone other than me, really. But the fun I have looking at Scrivener and saying, "Oh, that's a nice feature. I'll build that."
Yeah.
And
because you can create your own plugins and all that stuff within Obsidian.
Yes. Yeah. And I try to do it without plugins where possible,
Yeah.
because there's some fear that, what you export out of Obsidian is totally recreatable. That Obsidian file,
Yeah.
you can put it right back into Obsidian and it'll be in exactly the same form, even a backup. But if Obsidian goes out of business, what you're missing are the plugins, some of which people are coming to depend on,
Definitely.
for the way they manipulate data, not just the way they write it, but the way they manipulate it and find it, and et cetera. But there's almost nothing you can't make in Obsidian.
Yeah. So with the novel, do you also have a section within Obsidian of just like background information of world building that's not the novel itself, but just reference material for the book
Absolutely. And it's nice because you can just tab up those different documents. So my draft is one tab, and another tab are notes, and that's every kind of note. Technical notes for how to use. I forget the name of it, but when you're doing searches in certain word processors, you can use codes to search for what is it? Real? I can't remember what it is, but all the kind of codes that you might have to use to manipulate your text later, and all the notes on previous chapters. One thing I'm using ChatGPT for, which is great, is I've been working on this novel for 4 years, and so there's you go to write a chapter and you want a quick summary. So when I finish a chapter, I just have ChatGPT summarize it, and then I put it right in that chapter in a comment, so it doesn't get printed when I send out drafts.
But
to
a
the
good
editor.
reminder going back. It's like, oh, this is
Yeah, and I have it do it in bullet points and say what are all the key actions and transitions in relationships that happened in this chapter, and they're hidden right there in plain sight, right inside the draft itself. So I can do that, but the notes files, and then you can keep previous versions if you wanted to look back. So it's really good for notes. And then when you're doing notes, you often want them in sort of an outline format.
Sure. Yeah.
So that you can manipulate your ideas and say, no, that's really a category under that, and so in Obsidian and a lot of other these programs, you're just using that same text building document to have all these functions. Another version that you can play with is Logseq. I don't know if you've seen that. Logseq.
That's an app or Logseq?
That is an app, sort of like Obsidian.
Okay.
But I encourage you to play with Workflowy. You will not believe the functionality you get, and it saves all of your stuff automatically to Dropbox, whether you want it to or not.
Yeah, I'm downloading Logseq now just to play around with it.
Yeah.
And as far as inputting text, you were talking about voice control earlier.
Yeah.
That's an accessibility feature, is that right?
Yeah, it's in accessibility, and at first, I thought it was just not for dictation, but it's also you can control the navigation within a document. You can control moving things around in a document. You can literally stand up in the middle of your room and wander around with a beer and dictate your novel and see it on the big screen, and then pause and then go in and delete stuff and rework stuff and reconfigure stuff all by voice. And this used to be Dragon Systems, that you could do this with on the iPad. And now it's built right into the operating system, and it works as well on the Mac. I'm surprised how many people don't know about it, because you've listened to Mac Sparky.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Yeah. And he used to really depend on dictation like that. And he used those Dragon Systems dictations that were available on the Mac and the iPad. They aren't really anymore. And so now he's very happy to just tap the command button twice and do dictation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if he hasn't tried. A lot of the people have not tried this full-fledged
I'm looking at it now.
System.
It's pretty. It looks pretty cool because like there's a whole command section, and it's you can create your new commands, but also all the stuff is in there for like text editing. You click on it, and it shows you everything you can do, so you don't have to like guess what you can do. So there's like put curly quotes around that, and there's all these different commands that are in here.
Yeah.
So you can kind of learn it just by like looking at what's available, which is cool.
Yes, you learn it that way, and then you can combine those commands and give them a new name. So you could say, select the entire sentence, move it above the sentence above, and you put that in a thing, and you just call it move up. So your cursor is in a sentence, and you say move up. It selects a sentence, moves it above the one above it, and so anything you find yourself doing a lot as a writer, given every writer has their style of the way they move through and around the text. Yeah, it is really powerful. I discover something every day. Just yesterday, I remember that you can say select from Jeff through helicopter, and it will just select that text. And then you can, say bold that or delete it or copy it and move it. And
do you use voice control purely during the writing process, or do you use it in your just day-to-day usage of the iPad to navigate around the system?
I use it. It's on all day for me.
Okay.
Because a lot of things that you can do, but you would have to invoke the lady. You can just do without invoking her with commands such as, I don't want to say it. Well, it must be off now. But if I said, open drafts or something, it'll just open it.
Yeah. I mean, there's things like make emergency call, which is like you don't want to actually trigger that one.
You want to play with that exactly once.
Exactly, yes, yeah. But yeah, there's things like show doc, open control center, all the things you'd want, yeah.
Oh, Tim, you're going to love this.
Open voice control. There's even open voice control tutorial, so you can learn about voice control by talking to it, and yeah, there's
Tim,
all sorts of things.
When you just said that you can do open doc,
yeah,
the doc on my iPad just opened.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, because you are now controlling my iPad.
Oh, that's funny. So, with Siri, it can learn and only respond to certain voices. Voice control sounds like it might be more open-ended with just like taking input.
Yeah, so certainly the combination of shortcuts and voice control gets to be kind of crazy powerful.
Yeah, and you can, when you create a new command, the action can be insert text, run custom gesture, or run a shortcut. So you can even start. Have you done many custom commands with shortcuts directly integrated like that?
I have, and I forget which ones are custom now because I've been using them for so long.
Yeah.
But, it's one of those things where every couple months, which I just did recently, you go through and look at all the things and say, I've had to go over to the keyboard to do that because I forgot you can do that all through voice.
Yeah, and when you create these, you can have that custom command only work in like one application, so you're not constantly triggering something you don't want to, which is nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I knew this was there. I just forgot how powerful it is. And I often confuse this, I think, with So there's voice control, and then there's there's vocal shortcuts, live speech, and personal voice, which is a whole different avenue. But yeah, voice control is just what it sounds like, controlling everything with your voice. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can also turn it off with your voice. So, for example, when my wife comes in, she'll knock on the door, and the first thing I say to my iPad is stop listening. Otherwise, if I'm writing, she'll come in and we'll just start a conversation, and I'll have to delete 4 pages of text from my novel.
And it's got a nice little indicator on top right if it's active or not. And there's an attention aware ability if you want to just only use it when you're looking at the iPad with Face ID. There's a way.
Tried that.
Yeah.
I tried that.
But if you're at a computer monitor, that would probably not work as well. Like if you're at the studio display, I'm not sure if that would be harder.
Do you hook up your iPad to a studio monitor?
I do. Yeah, fairly often.
Do you have your iPad facing in a direction where it can recognize your face when you do that?
It would recognize my face, but attention aware would not work because it is actually looking for your eyes at that point versus your face being present. Because it'd be on a stand over to the side here, but my eyes aren't looking over there. So that's the problem with that.
A lot of times during the day, if I'm going online, I'll be waiting for, a password or something, and I'll realize it's waiting for me to lean over horizontally and put my face over my iPad.
Yeah, which is why I really wish Apple would support the Touch ID button on the Mac keyboard within iPad OS. That seems like such a no-brainer to figure out. Because that button's been there for a good half decade or more at this point, and we still can't use Touch ID from a Mac keyboard on the iPad, which is a shame.
I personally don't find the Touch ID a tenth as reliable as the Face ID.
Sure, yeah.
I have to to start my Mac up, I'm sort of laying my index finger on it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, you just let me know when you recognize something.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And the book you're working on, it's pure fiction or?
Yeah, it's fiction. So it's the term world building is largely emerged out of the fantasy writing world, but there certainly is world building in any fiction you write.
For sure. And like historical context, like what year it's set in, so like events around that time period would be important to be aware of and all that.
Yes. Yeah. Because I'm not a content provider in the daily sort of meaning of it. I haven't gotten into the form of note-taking that takes advantage of linking and reverse linking bits of text with each other. Not just, in Apple Notes, you can link notes to each other. Mm-hmm. But in something like Obsidian or in Craft, you can link, to a paragraph and to subdocuments, etc. And in world building, that apparently is quite magical. And for guys who are trying to come up with a new blog every week, they put every thought they have and every quote, everything in it, and then just hope that the magical spin of the map, the mapping software will juxtapose 4 unusual ideas that all are somehow related. I think a lot of that's going to disappear with AI because you can say, you can query your database now in most things and say, I want to write about transclusion or something, some technical thing, and say, not only do I want any information on transclusion, but I want anything that seems even metaphorically related to it. And it will generate vast lists much better than you could do yourself.
Yeah. Is any of the Apple Intelligence text feature something you've used much of or appreciate being?
I find it to be a weak sister to anything that's available online.
Yeah.
Um, Anytime I need something, it's generally an explicit moment where I'll grab something but
I find the
mostly,
workflow just challenging because the text stuff doesn't show you a before and after and like a change log. Like that stuff seems so critical to know if this is an improvement or not.
yeah, my most satisfying use of AI, and at various times I've paid for Claude or
Mm-hmm.
different things, but is when I'm designing something on the iPad, where I'm going to use multiple apps
Yeah.
and shortcuts. But I will say, I'm trying to come up with a system that can help me organize this, and here are some features I want. And it will say, as soon as you're done, would you like me to help you think through that
Mm.
problem? It doesn't just, I mean, it's brilliant. It's like what a good teacher would do. And it will say, have you thought about this? And have you thought about that? And you want more information on that? And I find most of it's, here's where it works and here's where it doesn't work. Most of its suggestions are very good, where it could say, yes, you could do build something that transfers your linear notes into a Kanban board, etc. And you want to know how to do that. So I'll think that's a great idea, going from the linear to the Kanban. But when it tells me how to do it in the app Kanban or in Obsidian or anything else, it never works. And it's quite hilarious
Yeah.
because it will say, look under the menu, the format menu, and choose, some command. And you'll do it. You go to do it, and that command's there. And then you'll say to it, well, I looked under that format menu, and the command's not there. It's so undefensive. It goes, yes, that's true. It's not there. And I just wanted to say, my mistake, just so I know, you know, we're following each other, but it cannot keep up with software changes, obviously, because the models often, are a year or so out of date. The Have you used Perplexity or any models that help you with in learning features of software you're currently using?
No, I've not tried that yet.
Yeah. So you can say, I forget how you do something, and it will tell you
Hmm.
instead of looking it up in a document or,
Yeah, that seems pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah.
I remember with the Mac, I used to rely on the help and just searching for all the keyboard shortcuts or menu items through just the help menu, which was such a nice thing
Yeah.
on the Mac. That's one of the nice things that's not quite there on the iPad with like searching for the little menu items there.
I remember back in the early 80s programming on an IBM PC and in a high level language. And when you'd make an error, it would connect you to the page in the documentation
Mm-hmm.
that explained how that feature was used.
Oh,
And
that's
that just
neat. Yeah.
seemed so
Right.
magical. It
Yeah.
would speed me up so much.
Yeah, for sure. When you use the iPad, is it mostly in split view or single apps? Stage Manager something you've done much with? Is that?
I have played with Stage Manager, and I find I flip back and forth, and because I prefer the limitation of the split screen
Yeah.
mode because there's it gets too fiddly trying to get three and four things just perfectly sized that all fit on the screen. You can do it,
You can.
and there are tricks to doing it, but I find often I'll take several minutes to set it up and then realize I'm not really using all that I don't
Yeah.
need them next to
No,
each other.
I'm the same way. I love split view or split screen, and I'll do slide over occasionally if I need a third app to reference, at a glance.
Yeah, but to use Command Tab and just have the other thing jump in front of you immediately, and then Command Tab again.
Yeah.
Speaking of slide over, I've looked this up and not been able to find out, but you know how slide over can be somewhat finicky about grabbing it and moving it off the screen and getting it on the screen, especially if the software you use has
like a gesture and
has panels on the right or
right.
the left, that kind of thing. It's tricky, and I was thinking there has to be a keyboard command to collapse and produce the slide over screen, and I can't find one. I have looked.
You could probably do a shortcut. I think there's a shortcut to show slide over. I'm not
Is
sure.
there?
I thought there was. I might be mistaken here.
Because
does voice control have that ability? Does voice control have a open slide over ability?
No, I don't think so. But that would give you a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I'm mistaken. It's not there.
Yeah. But doesn't that seem like something? Because if your slide over is something like your task manager, that's the kind of thing you'd want all day.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't need it up when you're doing the actual task.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I find it so finicky that I stop using it to try to drag it off from the screen. And also using the large screen monitor,
Yeah, on external monitors, slide over isn't even there because it reverts to Stage Manager for that.
Oh, but you can be in the a monitor without Stage Manager on.
External monitors?
Yeah.
I did not think that was possible. I thought currently Stage Manager would be the only thing unless you're like mirroring the iPad screen somehow.
Oh yeah, this would be in mirror mode.
Okay, yeah. Then you could, yes. But yeah, if you're using the external monitors the normal way now. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish that the Apple Intelligence was useful for writing, because there it is native. But obviously, what everyone's going, you can design funny, cute icons, etc.
Yeah.
But what we're waiting for is the agent level, and
yes, to have a dialogue with Siri and
and go outside your computer and perform functions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll see what becomes of Siri in the next year or two and how they can improve it with the app intents and all that stuff that ties in the shortcuts. And
just because it might be fun for you to have on record someone predicting something about AI, I'll say it to you, and you can decide whether to put it on your show or not. But the large language model, which is entirely a statistical model, 100%. The reason it's so fast, people say, how is it doing it so fast? Is when you say something, it's just going to a ginormous lookup table with all of the probabilities of what words follow what words and what words follow what two words. And, it's fairly complicated. But I think it has reached its limit. And it's not actually AI. It's not like the old school AI that was rules-based, such as the AI that could win a chess game or even a Go game, or an AI that can fold proteins. That's old school AI that requires massive parallel processing, but it knows rules. And the old kind of AI could do language, or they weren't making any progress on it, but it could do language by knowing syntax rules and trying to extract meaning, through very large rule-based models. The the large language model doesn't have a single rule in it.
Yeah. No, it doesn't.
And what it, you know how watching a dancing bear is amazing, and you say, that is amazing. Look at that bear dance. That we kind of have the dancing bear phenomenon going on of saying it is so human-like. But there's a difference between human-like and reliably doing calculative AI. And my prediction is the AI companies are going to hide this fact for about 2 more years, and they're desperately hiding it because they can raise now trillions of dollars for the hardware and the space and the server centers and the power and the nuclear power plants. And it's very exciting for them to be able to command that kind of money. But at some point, we're going to have to get back to the hunt for smart AI, which we weren't really very. Where it's, do you know where ChatGPT style LLMs are great is for coding, because that
Absolutely.
is
Yeah.
completely rule based. You know, if you do something, you go
Yeah, no,
right
it's
away.
perfect for that. Yeah.
And
But yeah, I do wonder how much further these large language models can extend. They've already built out these huge, they've already scraped the internet and a bunch of how much more is there how much more information can they build from, basically?
yes, and they're going to start scraping their own scrapings.
Yes, which will be problematic in many ways.
To happen. But if it turns out, it's going to be an interesting world if it turns out that coding is really where the real magic of these large language models is, other than just having conversational support for your own thinking. And
and tech support on websites and even phone calls, which that'll be both good and aggravating in many ways, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, but in terms of reconfiguring worker relationships, I think there are going to be some areas that cave. But I heard the CEO from Anthropic talking the other day about since Anthropic seems to be the best model for coding, what's his plan for laying off most of his staff? And he said, well, we're the good model. We're the model that is cautious. So we think a lot about that. But he didn't answer the question.
No.
And so it may show up in tech companies before it shows up in other companies.
Yes. No. It'll be, interesting to see how that plays out. And
yeah. Do you have a preference of model that you use?
I don't use them a bunch. ChatGPT is kind of what I just default into. And it's mostly just for fun and just to see what it can do. And
you would be amazed to put your own 250-word novel in and be able to sit back and say, when does Jenny first think she's in love with Nick?
Yeah.
And it's a highly speculative question.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not logic because she never says it.
Never says it, yeah.
And there it does the dancing bear thing extremely well.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of industry that is betting its future on being able to solve those kinds of problems.
No. And I think audio transcription is something that I can probably do pretty well at this point. And it's probably going to get better and better as computers get faster to work with that.
It does. It makes me wonder if I might be leaving voice control behind when someone comes out with a dictation app that is nigh unto perfect.
Right.
And can move around.
But it'd be interesting to have a searchable thing for the podcast based on the audio that I feed it. Yeah, it'd have to be smart enough to figure out if I'm speaking versus a guest is speaking, and
Yeah.
so that stuff is all questionable how good that is at this point. Yeah.
I find it's not good at that at all right now.
No.
Do you have transcriptions of all your podcasts?
I started to do that, and I couldn't keep up with it. Apple Podcasts, I find, is remarkable. That's kind of, if I want a transcription, I'll just open that app, and there they are. And that's been remarkable, just being able to just search through any episode I'm listening to. I use Pocket Cast most of the time, but if I want something for a transcription, I'll open Apple Podcasts to get a search out of it.
Do you get asked by many guests which podcast app you use?
No, not really. No.
It's a very meta question.
It really is, yeah. But I love Pocket Casts mainly because their Apple Watch app is so full-featured and standalone. You can listen to anything from the watch, including stuff that's not in your queue, which is really nice.
Yeah. I don't watch that many, listen to that many shows anymore that recommend a huge variety of apps. I'm mostly into the project management. Did you? But I would like to know more about, different podcast apps.
Yeah, no, I mean, they all have their strengths and weaknesses, but that's the one I've kind of settled on for my needs, at least.
Well, you just want to find the one that you sound best on.
That too helps, yes, quite a bit, yeah. Is there anything else we didn't touch on that you'd like to before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. I want to apologize if this has been kind of all over the map. But
no, it's been great. I love these kind of free form discussions.
Yeah, and we should definitely do this in 7 years.
Absolutely, maybe even sooner.
Good.
Yeah. Well, anything you want to promote or plug? Any past books or anything? Or
I tell you what, let's do one when my novel comes out.
Excellent. Do you have a sense as to how many chapters are left to write and all that?
I have a sense that I'm about 70% done.
Nice. Okay.
And if I extrapolate from how long I've been working on it, it's
a couple more years, probably.
Yeah, a couple more years.
Yeah.
Because the more I write, the more I learn about the subject, and then I realize, there's a much better way to set that up.
Yes.
I'm sure my editors, would wish to drag me away from the project, but
yeah,
I'm going to make it perfect.
No, for sure. Well, thank you, Tom. This has been a great chat, and I really appreciate you coming back. It's been great to reconnect and dive into all these fun topics here.
You too, Tim. I always listen to your podcast and never miss it.
Well, that's my discussion with Tom. I hope you enjoyed it. My thanks again to Tom for recording this episode. My thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. With that, I'll talk with everyone again real soon.